Okay, so this is my third try at starting this video. We're going to be looking at photosynthesis tonight, and the two reactions that make up photosynthesis and make it possible, the light reactions and the dark reactions. And by the end of the video, you should have a better understanding of how plants are able to harness sunlight and use the energy from sunlight and kind of transform it and use it to put together carbon dioxides to make sugars. Okay, so first we're just going to start off with light energy by itself. So light is not a particle. We've talked about carbon dioxide or water. Those are particles. They're made up of atoms. Those atoms come together to make a molecule. Light energy isn't made up of, there's no carbon atoms in light energy. It's just energy moving in the form of a wave. And the energy that we can see, if it's actually, if you look in this lower right-hand corner, we can only see this really small band of light energy. So gamma rays are down here, really, really small, and radio waves are over here, and they're really big. All the things in white we can't see. This little tiny fraction in here is what our eyes can pick up. So a little bit less than 400 and over 700. The other cool thing that you see is if the wavelength, so you can move over to this picture, from crest to crest of the wave is 400 nanometers. That wave is going to show up as purple. Our eyes would see it as purple. If we increase the wavelength and we made that longer, then it's going to move up and be red. So if we went to like 700, it's going to be towards like a red color. If you've ever played with any audio mixers, sound kind of has similar properties. You're going to hear different sounds if you stretch the wavelength or you compress the wavelength, and it's going to make your voice sound funny. If you talk into something and then you stretch or compress the wavelength, it's going to make it sound funny. So that's what we have, light energy. And now we're going to move into starting to talk about how a plant's actually able to use, well, we'll talk a little bit more about what energy is, and then we'll talk about how plants are able to use that energy. So let's define photosynthesis. It's the process by which plants use sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to make high energy carbohydrates and oxygen. High energy carbohydrate is just a sugar. Make sugar that it needs and it keeps, and then oxygen it doesn't need, so it just releases it out into the atmosphere. Once it's used oxygen for what it needs, used water for what it needs, it releases the oxygen. So let's just look at an overview. The purpose of it is to make sugar, those high energy carbohydrates for the plant. It happens in the chloroplast. You need CO2, water, and sunlight for it to start, and you're going to make C6H12O6, so glucose, and you're going to make oxygen. So that's a general overview for photosynthesis. Now we get into the different parts. For the light reaction, you need certain things for the light reaction to happen, and you need certain things for the dark reaction to happen. But the two processes that we talk about, they can happen independently of each other. So here's our balanced equation. And sorry, I didn't put the subscript for the numbers here, 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 and here. And I don't know if I talked about this in detail with respiration. It's a good point, good place for me to start now. The number to the left is like a multiplier. So if you have 6 here, it means that there's 6 carbon atoms, and this little O2, the O2 means that there's 2 oxygen. So we apply our multiplier, 6 times 2, we have 12. So we need 6 carbons and 12 oxygens from CO2. And then we do the same thing here, multiplier 6 to our H2, we have 12 hydrogens and 6 oxygens from water. And then if you counted them up over on this side, we don't create or destroy any atoms. They're what you start off with is what you end up with on the other side. Okay, so at the very beginning of the video, I said we'd be learning about light-dependent and light-independent reactions. Those are the two stages of photosynthesis. If you could think of from like maybe a standpoint of evolution, or you thought about a regular day, a plant's going to have some time where it's in full daylight, and then it's going to have some time where it's not in full daylight. But the plant's going to have to be living. It's going to have to be a living plant, for 24 hours of the day. It needs to live all the time. And so by breaking the reaction into two parts, it's able to use the energy of the sun when it's available, and store up a bunch of kind of high energy transport, store up the energy to be transported and used later. And then when it's, during the daylight or in the dark, no matter what, then it can run the dark reactions. It has a separate stage of reactions that it can run. And that allows it to be a little bit more flexible as far as daylight and nighttime. And also, if it's shaded for a few days for some reason, the plant could still live and it could still run photosynthesis until it runs out of the products that it created from the light reactions. So that was kind of a detailed overview, but this is the basic part. We have those two stages. So let's get into them in more detail. Oh, I guess before we do that, we'll look at some of the cast of characters. So I just thought like the most interesting parts about photosynthesis. Number one is, how can a green leaf take this wavelength from the sun and use it? It's, even for our, like, you could have I'm losing the word. You can have a photoelectric system on the top of your house that you use to generate energy, not nearly as efficient as plants. So what is it about plants? What structure does this capturing of the energy? And it's this guy, the light receptor, P680. There's also another one, P720. And they're just a pigment molecule. What the pigment molecule does have, though, it's got this manganese ion. It's got a metal ion in it, and it's that metal ion gets hit with with a wavelength of light, and that metal ion kicks out electrons. So that's basically, if you boiled the structure down, the thing that really lets it accept or harness energy from the sun, it starts right there with that metal ion. And there's a ton of those pigments all throughout the leaf, all continuously kicking out electrons that can be used to make the reaction happen. So you have your receptor, you have that point where you take light energy and you turn it to an electron that can be harnessed and used for other things, just like electrons were used in the electron transport chain of respiration. Our photosynthesis is going to harness those energies from the electrons, and it's got similar high energy carriers. ADP you already know, and some of you kind of maybe had wondered, what does it look like, or what it is. Adenine, which, if you remember from life sciences, adenine is what makes up DNA. So that molecule is attached to a ribose sugar. So also another thing from RNA. RNA has ribose. And then is just some phosphate groups attached on. And that's that high energy bond is the charge going from the diphosphate to triphosphate. And then next is NADP and NADPH, and it's called nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. You don't have to know that word, just know NADP or NADPH. And this is what it looks like. But you see some of those same structures. You see the ribose sugar, another ribose sugar. You see the adenine. You see two phosphates attaching them. And this is the nicotinamide structure. And this on this structure is where it's the energy rich form or the energy poor form, is this bond right here. So just a single bond in this whole big molecule is what is used to store and transfer energy. That is kind of like a more in-depth overview, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little background on some of those important molecules before we jumped into the rest of the video. So first reaction is the light-dependent reactions. The purpose of it is to capture light energy to fuel the Calvin cycle. In the Calvin cycle, we'll actually put carbon dioxides, carbon bonds together and make a glucose. In the light dependent, you don't put any carbons together. All you do is capture light energy, or all the plant does is capture light energy. This occurs in the thylakoid of the chloroplast. The two things that you need are water and sunlight. Those are your only two needs. So if I ask you on a quiz or on a test, do you need carbon dioxide for the light reaction to happen? You would say no, because you know, we talked about it right now, or you at least heard about it right now. All you need is water and sunlight. The energy from the sun is going to provide electrons, and the water is going to provide a reducing agent, so it's going to accept electrons, which is really important. When it accepts the electrons, that's when we form the oxygen. The oxygen gas is just a waste product or a byproduct. The plant doesn't need that anymore to do any more reactions or processes, so it just releases it as oxygen gas. And you also, at this step, we meet those two characters that we talked about last slide, which is ATP and NADPH. And those are our high energy, our energy carriers. So they generate energy that we can use to put together carbons. You might ask yourself, well, I know that respiration happens in a plant, so how come oxygen gas is released and not used in respiration? And the reason is because photosynthesis happens at a much higher rate than respiration happens in a plant. So you're generating way more oxygen than you are generating CO2 from the plant. So that's why it's oxygen that's released. Okay, so let's look at light independent. We're not going to follow the different forms of the carbon molecules as they go around. The light dependent reaction is where you're joining carbons together. The plant's able to do carbon chemistry and form carbon-carbon bonds. It's also known as the Calvin cycle because it was discovered by Melvin Calvin. The purpose of the Calvin cycle is to make sugar. So that's when the plant's finally getting that energy storage source that it needs for use later on for respiration. This is going to occur in the stroma of the chloroplast. And for this step, you do need CO2, and you need your high energy molecules NADPH and ATP. You're going to use those energy bonds that I pointed out when I showed those molecules. You're going to use those energy bonds, and as you break the ATP bond or the NADPH bond, as you break that, you're going to use the energy from that bond to put together carbons, and that's how you actually they join together, how the carbon atoms bond together. And then at the very end, then you finally have your other end product of photosynthesis, which is glucose. So what I'd like you to do at the end, as your last kind of whole part of the notes, is make a table of the reactants and products for the light reaction and for the dark reactions. And that would be your last thing for the slide. Oh, another cool thing is that a little bit more detail about NADPH. It's kind of cool. It's also found in immune cells, and NADPH can create radicals. So you might have heard of free oxygen radicals that develop in your cells, and they're damaging, so they can kind of break down cell parts. And you can drink things like green tea that are antioxidants, or there's the grape juice commercial with the guy that does that's on the Food Network. Elton Brown. So basically, NADPH is used by your immune cells to create radicals to blow up invading any invading bacteria or viruses. It can fight off the things in the cells by creating these radicals that destroy um, other like infectious diseases and things, which I thought was kind of cool. All right, you have a good night, and we'll see you back in class.